It's Saturday Stockman Stampede, a tag started by Terry's Knives and Man Stuff. And today, I have a Boker Stockman to show you. I won this knife in an auction. It was only about 20 bucks. Now, when I got this, it was in pretty bad shape, which you'll see at the end of the video. You'll see some of the improvements and modifications I made to this knife. But take a look at those back springs. It's built pretty nice. I've had to make quite a few fixes on this knife. It was really rusty. And these pivots, there was so much rust that came out of everything, the blades would barely open. It was almost such that you need to take pliers in order to open the blades, the way I initially received the knife. So I cleaned up all the rust. I polished it up with case paste. You can see it says Solingen on the shield, and also on the stamp on the main blade. Let me show you what this knife looks like. Let's take a look at the blades. Here you have the main blade, which there's still a lot left on that. This blade had been used to scrape. There were flat spots on the edge all up in this area, so it took a little bit of regrinding to put a proper bevel on it. The bevel is still a little larger on one side than the other. I'm not sure if you'll pick that up on the camera, but it came with the bevel mostly on one side, so I'll gradually sharpen this side more to even it out over time. I didn't want to do it all at once, and I didn't want to remove that much metal. You also see here, this blade had a lot of wobble in it, so I squeezed the bolsters in the vise and then peened this over a little bit with the hammer. I still need to sand this down and then repolish this bolster. I just want to use it as is for a while and verify that the mod I had holds and that this doesn't come loose again. I don't want to have to redo it. I only want to have to do this, sand and polish the bolster one time. Now on to the next blade. Now normally in the Stockman, this blade that's next to the clip point is your sheep's foot. The sheep's foot was so worn down and it had so much of a curve in it, it was no longer going to work as a sheep's foot. And if I sharpened it to turn it back into a sheep's foot, I would be removing too much metal. So I reground it into a pen blade, and I am quite happy with the result. That is a very nice blade. You can hear how sticky it is. It's nice and sharp now. And the last blade, this used to be the spay blade. I did want a sheep's foot on this knife. Now a sheep's foot is my most used blade on a Stockman, and the way this spay blade was worn, it really lent itself to turning into a sheep's foot. So I reground this down and sharpened it, and now I have a beautiful sheep's foot on this knife, just in the opposite spot. So you have the sheep's foot here and the pen blade over here. So I think it turned out really well. I'm very happy with the modifications to this knife. And let's listen to the snap. No half stops. These two small blades have pretty good snap. They have a pretty good pull on them. This main blade is a little bit weak. It's not bad. It's perfectly safe, but it is a little bit weak. Still has some snap to it, but it's definitely, I'll put it along the line with a new USA-made Boker Stockman. That's about how much. They have a lot of complaints against them for the springs being too weak, and this main blade is about like the springs on those. So all in all, this is a great knife. I did have to adjust the centering on this blade a little. It was rubbing that liner really hard. Now if I open it and close it, it comes up. It does. Let me get a little closer to where the lens is. It's not perfect. It still favors the one side just a little bit, but it's pretty close, and I'm very happy with that. And if you look, I have space between all the blades. I think you can see that in the camera. So this turned out to be a really nice knife once it was all cleaned up and restored. Now, just a question I have to ask. What would you do? I was thinking about refinishing these blades with a 600 grit finish. I can use 600 grit sandpaper and put a nice satin finish on these. Or should I just leave it as is with the old worn look? Let me know in the comments below what you think. And if you continue watching the rest of the video, I'll show you some highlights of the restoration process of this knife. So it doesn't really have any snap left to it. I'm going to try oiling it up and see what happens. The sheep's foot blade doesn't look too much like a sheep's foot anymore. It almost looks more like a spear point. And there's the spade blade. I might do a little reprofiling on these blades, but first step is let's see if we can get a little bit of snapback in this knife. This is my pivot lube. It's really a pivot flush and cleaner. And I have thicker stuff for the actual lube. A towel or a rag helps with this to protect you from getting cut by the edge. So this one is definitely in need of sharpening. That made a difference. It's going to need quite a bit more. Cleaning and working, but it's getting some snapback. You can hear it snap into the open position now, because I had absolutely nothing there before. I love the needle tip on this bottle. You can put this stuff right where you want it. Look at that gunk coming out of there. There's probably a bunch of rust in there. Okay, let's move on to the next blade. I want to try this main blade and see if this will come up. You have to be extra careful trying to do this behind the camera. It's easy to cut yourself when you're looking at a camera. Already there's some snap starting to come back. This blade had nothing. See there already? You can see the snap on the opening. Watch. You see all the gunk down in there? A lot more gunk coming out. So some of these old knives may seem like they don't work at all, and they may seem about hopeless. But with just a little bit of work, you can get them functioning pretty well again. Just out of curiosity, I want to see how this back spring will come up. This is 400 grit. It's pretty worn. It'll need a little bit more. I'm going to keep working these blades and putting some more oil in it off camera and try and clean out the inside of the knife a little bit. Get a flashlight. Try and clean some of that garbage out that's in there. Actually, doesn't look too bad considering. So I'm going to do some off camera and then I'll come back and show you the results. Now, one thing I would like to do is I would like to get a sheep's foot blade on this knife. Here would have been what was the sheep's foot. And that's been sharpened and ground down so much it's more like a pen blade. I don't think there's any chance of turning this back into a sheep's foot. But the original spay blade, I think I can make a sheep's foot out of that. So I may try and switch these. I may try and make a sheep's foot out of this blade and sharpen this one up as a pen blade and switch the two. So after a few minutes on a little 1x30 strip sander, we now have a sheep's foot blade. Here's a look at it. Put a rough bevel on it. It's now a nice sheep's foot blade. So now we have a very different knife than when this was new. Over here, we now have a pen blade. This originally would have been the sheep's foot. And over here, we turned the spade blade into a sheep's foot blade. So this will be a very nice, very functional knife. I'll just have to keep cleaning until all that garbage gets out of the pivot. We look at what's running out of that just right now. I stayed away from the nail nick. I went as close to it as I could get to get enough taper on here for the sheep's foot. I think this is going to work out just great. This main blade is pretty rough and needs a little bit of work on the sander. The clip point's looking a lot better. I think I'm going to take just a little bit off the kick of this blade. If I open up the new sheep's foot, you can see that the point of the blade sticks up a little bit. So there should be room. I can take some off of this kick, and I have a little bit of room before the nail nick interferes. That's as much as I'm going to drop it. That's definitely a lot better than it was. And I still have room for the nail nick. The choil makes it a lot easier to sharpen. So I'm going to rest the knife against the Dremel tool to help get some precision. Put my reading glasses on. I'm going to line it up. Just go slow. And that's all it takes. Very quick and very easy. The main blade's off center, but the pivot is loose. I'm going to try and squeeze the pivot a little bit and see what happens with the centering. little bit at a time. The pivot's now about right, but the blade centering didn't change at all.